what's up guys, Vitaly here today, and today we're actually going to talk about not portraiture but actually sports, and I'm going to talk about how I photograph sports and actually why I use prime lenses rather than zoom lenses. Stick around. So before I dive in specifically the prime lenses, I want to talk about a few things when photographing sports and particularly basketball. Now, as most of you know, I come with a background where I just photograph portraits, maybe weddings, family sessions and stuff like that. But my family has been more into sports lately. My children, I take them to sports pretty much every single week. And I figured, why waste my time? Let me just learn a little bit more about sports and particularly basketball. Now, I think this is also would apply to someone who plays volleyball. Maybe not so much of soccer because it's a larger field, but I'm going to talk about how to shoot indoors. I'm going to talk about settings. I'm going to talk about lenses that I use, as well as cameras that I use and why. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is the camera position and where do you want to position yourself along the basketball court. So one of the things that you may or may not know is that the basketball court, typical size of it, is about 50 feet by 94 feet wide. Obviously, there are many places where you can sit along the court and you can certainly use zoom lenses, but because I'm talking about the prime lenses and I'm going to dive in a little bit later why, I want to talk to you about where do you want to position yourself as a photographer in order to get those really best shots when it comes to action and maybe somebody's really, kind of a dunking or something like that, that you can have those shots. Now, I'm not photographing a professional sports, and if you're a professional photographer who does basketball, I would love to hear your comments below. I'm not a pro when it comes to basketball, but I have learned enough, I think, to be able to understand a little bit where people are coming from when it comes to photographing sports. So particularly as a position when it comes to camera, where do you get those best shots where somebody is maybe blocking someone or maybe a player is about to throw a ball, something that's actionable, something that maybe you will see a lot of times on billboards or magazines. How do you get those shots? So obviously, you on one side of a field, basically along that, the width of the basketball court, you have a team A, as you can see, shown in red, and you have also team B shown in red on one side of the field. And on the other side of the field, you, in kind of the blue line, represents where the spectators usually would be. And then you can certainly shoot from the spectator standpoint, but a lot of times you're going to get those angle shots. And don't get me wrong, sometimes those shots are very important, and you want to be able to capture maybe the magnitude of the field, where the players are, and how active the game is taking place. Now, but I think if you want to get those really super cool shots, and I want to show you where you might want to be in order to capture that awesome angles. Now, one of the places where you don't want to be is you don't want to be if you are standing and behind the field and you are, the basketball hoop is in front of you. You don't want to be standing to the left of that. And the reason of that, because frequently if you want to get that shot where somebody is about to throw, many shooters are right-handed. And what happens is when somebody is right-handed and they throw a ball, you're not going to see their faces. And you're going to have those, like in this picture, this example, where you have a face of a player is covered with the hand. So that's the place that you want to avoid. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't get great shots, maybe action shots, somebody running or somebody blocking, but that's not the place where I usually would go first. So, but the place where I want to be is somewhere along this yellow line, right? Where maybe a player is running towards you, or maybe a player is about to throw a ball, or maybe there's a foul, and a lot of fouls that usually would be near the basketball hoop. And especially if you want to get those shots from underneath the basketball hoop, and if you are using a wide angle lens, those are amazing shots that you can get from that specific perspective. So again, there's so many important shots to get. I'm not going to argue with that. Along the spectator line, maybe from the corner of the field. But again, if you want to get those really super cool shots that you frequently see in the magazines, or you see maybe on tabloids somewhere, that's the place to be. The next thing I want to talk about the cameras that I use and why. So, depending if you're a Sony or Canon or Nikon or Fuji shooter, whatever might be best for you. So, I particularly am a Nikon shooter, and I shoot with Nikon Z9. Spectacular camera. This camera shoots up to 120 frames per second in stills. You do get about 11 megapixel images in JPEGs when you shoot, but it is fine for sports because frequently when photographers need to transfer their files over to a publisher or somebody, or a website, the smaller the size, it's insufficient enough for you to have it on a screen. Now, but I typically shoot with Z9, okay, is my primary camera. This is a 45 megapixel camera, and I have Nikon ZF. And you might say, well, Nikon ZF, this looks like a retro style camera, must be very slow. Well, I gotta tell you, no, it is a spectacular camera because these two cameras actually are sharing the same X-Speed 7 processor, which allows you to, process so much data at one time. Now, what's unique about this specific camera that it's a half the size in price as well as cost, if not even more, the Nikon Z9, but this one has what is called a 3D tracking that allows you to really track your subject along the field. As soon as basically you point on a player, a specific subject, it really starts tracking. As long as you half press maybe your shutter button, or maybe if you have a back button set up for following the subject, it does an amazing job. And pretty much you get, like 95% of shots in focus. Doesn't matter what the subject is doing as long as it's following the subject. So these are my two primary cameras that I use for photographing basketball. And let me know in the comments below, what cameras do you use and why? And do you get pretty consistent hit rate with your cameras? All right, so the next thing, let's talk about the lenses, which lenses that I use. And as you can tell from the title of this video, I'm using prime lenses. So if you're looking at, the a 70-200 that you think, you're going to get a lot of shots, and absolutely, yes, you can. The problem with this lens is, and you will find that many photographers do use, sports photographers, the 70-200 because of how far the lens can reach. Now, I don't use this lens because of the 2.8 factor for the aperture and how much light it can gather. Now, somebody would say, well, the 24-70 2.8 is a spectacular lens, and I have this lens, and I could literally use both of these lenses, and I probably get decent shots. But what I have found personally, that I get better shots, cleaner images when I use prime lenses. And let me tell you why. When I use a prime lenses, such as a 50mm f1.8 or 85mm f1.8, these will be my two primary lenses actually that I would take with me to shoot basketball, because with 70-200, yes, you can reach far to the other side of the court, but I have to tell you, because the action is so fast, and literally within maybe 1 minute of the time, basketball players go from one side of the field pretty fast multiple times, easily 5 to 6 times per minute. And because it's only 94-foot basketball court, so there's a lot of action happens back and forth all the time. So if I didn't get a shot maybe one time, I'm probably going to get a shot on the second or third try. So having this 50 or 85mm f1.8, it will give you those spectacular images, as you can see right here, right now.
Say what it be, I know the king, follow his lead, repeat after me. I know they lurking, this serpent is circling, but I never worry, cause he got the keys, he let it bleed. Never put me on the freeze, just look how he spit it to me. It'll be out of right after I see. You can't make the promise unless you the king. Jay with a baby, I am what he made me. No, you cannot shame me, so it's for the birds. Buy for a price, you ain't know what it's worth. He not letting go like it's...
You know, the specific reason why. So one of the things is that because it's simply, these lenses are so sharp and so fast, they really give me very clean images because of the light gathering capabilities, because it goes as low as f1.8, and that allows me to have much cleaner ISO, much cleaner images than if I was shooting at 2.8. Now I have also used a number of times that recently actually reviewed. I'm gonna put up in the link here. I'm gonna put a link up right here. This is a Viltrox, actually, a 27mm f1.2 spectacular lens. Now, one thing to note, this is for crop sensor cameras. Now, what happens when you put this lens on the full frame cameras such as Nikon Z9 or Nikon ZF, you're gonna get about 40.5mm focal length. But the beauty about this lens, because it goes down to 1.2, which means that you still get to keep your shutter speed pretty high, but you get to bring your ISO fairly low for indoor conditions, somewhere down to maybe 1250 ISO, maybe 1600 for when you have action shots. So using these lenses, I get so many images, not only in focus, but they're super clean. I get to share them online with friends and family, and it's really a beauty to use. Now, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely place for a 70-200, because as a professional photographer, sports photographer, you do need to capture that or wide angle images, and having a 24-70 will do an excellent job at 2.8. Now, it makes a big difference how well the courts are lit. Some newer courts, basketball courts, have a better lighting, so you may be able to bring your ISO much lower, even if you're still using that 24-70 2.8, or even if you're using the 70-200 2.8. So, but again, big reason that I'm using prime lenses, I get cleaner images. These are very fast focusing lenses. They keep your subject in tracking, fairly well, and I am very pleased with the results. Now, I would love to know in the comments below, what lenses do you guys use for your maybe indoor photography when it comes to sports? Maybe it's basketball, maybe it's volleyball. That's closely related to basketball when it comes to the lighting conditions. Now, obviously, when you're shooting something like, baseball, or maybe shooting soccer, lacrosse, where you have much larger field, you absolutely need a zoom lens, and maybe even prime lens, super telephoto, like I don't know, 400mm or something like that, to be able to reach further. But because you're shooting outdoors, frequently you do stop down to or go up, rather, when it comes to the ISO. Now, one of the things, the word of caution, I would say, with the very low aperture, such as this one, f1.2, what happens is basketball is a fast-moving sport. And even as great as these cameras are, the Z9 and the ZF, you do find from time to time that even though the camera is tracking subject fairly well, and this is a fairly fast focusing lens as well, even though it's Viltrox, a third-party lens, you do have those images where maybe a person's eye might be a little bit out of focus, because the focal plane is so thin on these 1.2 lenses that it is hard to capture person sometimes if they're moving really fast. So I kind of found that the 1.8 lenses, where your focal plane is a little bit wider, I find that this is a little bit more preferred than f1.2. Now, frequently, obviously, with f1.2.8, you have your focal plane, much wider. So most of the time, you do get sharp images. So something just to be aware of when you have a super low aperture as f1.2, your focal plane get sharper, thin. So, but the distance makes a big difference. If the subject is further away, that the focal plane gets bigger. So there's a science to it. But I think general rule of thumb, f1.8 is gonna do an amazing job for you. Now, and the last thing I want to talk about is the camera settings, because I think as someone who usually doesn't shoot sports a lot, especially indoors, I was very curious about what results, what camera settings do I have to use in order to get those really cool shots that are sharp, that are fairly clean images. So I typically shoot at about 1250 when it comes to the shutter speed over second, and I get pretty good results. You can certainly go for just to make sure you have a sharp images to maybe 1600th of a second. That will do the job as well. When it comes to aperture, it's anywhere at f1.8 to f2.8. But again, going back to those reason for prime lenses, at f1.8, you get to keep your ISO fairly low. And I usually shoot anywhere between 2000 and 4000 ISO. With 4000 ISO, you do have a little bit more grain that you can clean up and post. At 2000 ISO, you're looking at the f1.2 lenses, when it comes to the aperture. But, anywhere from 2000 to 4000 ISO, this is the range that I find myself shooting frequently. And I also shoot with white balance, anywhere between 3200 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin based on lighting conditions. And I typically, once I set my white balance, I kind of stick with it. I don't shoot in auto. I shoot it with, if you want a specific white balance, because it's indoor. Lighting is not going to be changing. We have no clouds going. We have no sound going out. So once you set your white balance, you pretty much can forget it. And because of that, it allows me to shoot JPEGs, right? I'm not shooting RAW when it comes to images. When you set this camera to, 10 frames per second, 20 frames per second, 60 frames per second, I'm not going through a ton of images. I don't want to do that because you typically get really good shots. If you specifically sitting like under the basketball hoop and you want to get that awesome shot, setting at 10 frames per second, maybe Z9, or even this camera, ZF, 10 frames per second, it's going to do a really, really good job. So I don't shoot RAW. Maybe you do, awesome, more power to you. It's a lot of images to process. I think if I was shooting professionally when I'm getting paid, maybe I would consider shooting more in RAW, but for the most part in JPEGs. So guys, let me know in the comments below, please. What camera settings do you use for sports? Maybe shooting outdoors. I'd love to hear that as well. If you're shooting a soccer, if you're shooting baseball or any other fast-moving sport. But please let us know in the comments below, what settings do you use when you shoot indoors, basketball, volleyball, or something else indoors. Would be great to know, especially with the Olympics coming pretty soon. And some people are trying to get to know more. Maybe you are not a professional shooter, but a photographer, but you are going out there and you want to bring your camera and you want to get the best shots possible. Maybe you want to practice somewhere and to see what you get. I'd love to hear that. So with that, I am gonna end the video. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, and because that allows me to make more videos like this for viewers like you. Thank you.
I can be a diamond, the one that you can find in, give you time and a little more. And baby girl, won't you come my way? Hop up in that plane, maybe we could spend a day somewhere in the world where